because everyone's here now. Okay, great. Well, I really would like to welcome everyone today to today's panel discussion on bodily autonomy, trans and reproductive rights united. I want to wish you all a happy LGBTQ plus Pride Month and also acknowledge that June 19th is Juneteenth. I'm Emily Wu Yamasaki. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a member of the New York City Mobilization for Reproductive Justice. I'm also a member of the United Auto Workers Local 2320, which is one of the many labor endorsers of the National Mobilization. And I'm also a member of Radical Women. As a queer and non-binary activist of color, today's issue is very close to my heart, and I'm so happy to be moderating this event. And I really look forward to hearing from the speakers. I'd like to, the chat's disabled so people can't introduce themselves in the chat. We can give folks a chance to do that when the discussion starts. Jordana?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh, I think we were going to invite people to introduce themselves in the chat, but that's currently disabled. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let's do that when we get to the discussion.
Okay, sounds good. Great. We're looking forward to meeting all of you and hearing your thoughts in the discussion. And I want to give a special welcome, though, to today's speakers. We have three speakers, Raya Dunayevskaya, Cindy Chartier, and Raymond Ortega, and I'll be telling you more about each of them as we get closer to them speaking. But I want to really welcome them and thank them for joining us today. Today's event is the first of a three-part Reproductive Freedom Summer series featuring online panel discussions highlighting key intersectional questions in the movements to defend bodily autonomy and reproductive rights. The summer series is being organized by the National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice, which I'll refer to as Mobilization for short, which in the summer of 2021, in the face of the impending Supreme Court decision regarding the fate of Roe v. Wade, was initiated by the organization Radical Women to step up the defense of abortion rights and broaden the fight for full reproductive justice and bodily autonomy. Fast forward to 2025 with the return of Trump and the vicious attacks on trans people, immigrants, Palestine solidarity activists, federal workers and programs, civil liberties, and the left. As we know, the list is only expanding. But while the assaults and the threat of fascism are growing, so is the fight back, with protesters hitting the streets, some getting out for their first protest ever. I know just these past couple weeks, many of us have been out there demanding an end to the ICE raids and deportations and opposing Trump at the No Kings national protests yesterday. The attacks on the trans community at both the legislative and non-legislative levels have increased exponentially since Trump took office for the second time. But we also know that trans folk have long been a target since before Trump's second term started. From the date of Transgender Day of Remembrance in November 2023 to the date of the Day of Remembrance 2024 alone, there were 36 recorded violent deaths of transgender and gender nonconforming people. And those were just the ones that were recorded. So we know, of course, the number is much higher. With the most staggering numbers being for Black trans women. In 2024, 56% of transgender people who died from violence were Black trans women, and they also accounted for 78% of all transgender women murdered in the US. But trans folk, along with their allies, are fighting back. Trans youth, in particular, a prime target of Trump and the ultra-right, have been in the forefront of the battle for gender-affirming care, both inside and outside the courts. The fight to defend trans youth and trans communities is all of our fight. The National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice and its affiliates across the country are building a multiracial, multi-generational grassroots coalition of organizations and individuals to actively oppose these right-wing political assaults. The mobilization is centered around 12 demands, including safe legal abortion on demand, stop forced sterilization, defend queer and trans families, guarantee gender affirming care, and no to cage kids. That's just 4 of the demands. You can see the full list of demands at reprojustice.now.org, where you can also learn about last year's historic letter campaign calling on the AFL-CIO to convene a national labor conference on reproductive justice. The mobilization believes that attempts to undermine the right to reproductive and bodily autonomy are an attack on all of our lives and healthcare needs, and that nothing short of a united grassroots movement that leaves no one behind is needed to defend ourselves and win full reproductive justice. These summer series events are featuring speakers from different organizations and regions to discuss their activism around issues and discussions which will address how to take action. Today's event is focused on bodily autonomy, trans and reproductive rights united. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to our speakers. We're going to have our speakers, then we'll have open discussion, and then the speakers will have an opportunity for brief wrap-ups, and then we'll have some announcements to close out the program. So our first speaker is Raya Dunayevskaya, pronouns they, them. And Raya has been a socialist for a little over a decade, working with a variety of organizations, and has been out publicly as trans for a little longer than that. They have worked at Amazon for about 7 years and are a founding member and currently the organizational secretary of the Logistics Workers League in Kentucky, and has had a connection to the reproductive justice movement in particular since 2016. So with that, I'll hand it over to Raya.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm afraid I have to begin with a bit of a confession. Raya Dunayevskaya is not my name. Raya is. Dunayevskaya is a pseudonym that I use for public events on occasion, and that's for a very simple reason. My employer spends millions and millions of dollars paying union buster lawyers to do surveillance on warehouse workers, and I figure they ought to have to work for all that money. I also use it because I want to honor the legacy of historical figure Raya Dunayevskaya. I'm not going to get into everything she did. That would be an entire event on its own. But one thing I want to pull out is her book, Marxism and Freedom, which is a very interesting text that tries to blend Marxist and humanist philosophy, and also contains the first English language publication of Karl Marx's economic and philosophic manuscripts of 1844. And the reason I'm pulling this out, trust me, it is related to bodily autonomy, is that these manuscripts and this philosophic discussion is centered around an idea called the alienation of labor. So it's the process by which workers are removed from control of our work, where we're disconnected from the things we produce, we're disconnected from control of our everyday activity, and we're disconnected from each other. So labor is alienated when it happens under the direction of a boss or a multinational corporation, rather than people actually doing the work. Warehouse workers like myself are assigned places on the line, desperately struggling to meet standards of work designed by multinational corporations and headquarters thousands of miles away from where we actually are. And when we have this structure in the workplace, as we do in all capitalist societies, more and more the rest of society shifts to match. Every aspect of our lives steadily takes on the gray tone of factory life, and the constant whir of the assembly line can be heard in the background. Even if we were to view this as confined only to the workplace, what would mean that workers spend a huge amount of our lives with basically zero bodily autonomy, zero liberty, zero individual rights. But even more than that, this background of alienation creates the conditions for the capitalist class to strip away our bodily autonomy in all spheres of human activity. It's what makes transphobic and patriarchal oppression even thinkable. The capitalist class is so used to controlling workers' lives in the workplace, controlling our bodies simply becomes a second nature to them. If they're having problems with the declining supply of labor, no problem. They'll just ban abortion and force people to churn out more workers for the assembly line. If they're having problems getting workers to accept low-paying or physically demanding jobs, no problem. They'll use transphobic, racist, and homophobic oppression to force workers into conditions of super exploitation, to discipline layers of the working class into taking shit jobs for low pay. I'm going to go ahead and call it the Starbucks Corporation here as a very classic example of this, where trans workers are concerned. For quite some time, Starbucks consciously cultivated the image of a liberal corporation, one where you could go to work without fear of discrimination against you if you're a queer person or a trans person. And more than that, they promised that if you were trans and you worked there, you'd be able to get gender-affirming health care. Then, when workers started organizing to demand fair pay and dignity and respect in the workplace, they announced that they were going to get rid of gender-affirming healthcare from company healthcare plans, essentially using transphobia and their control of workers' healthcare as a whip to try to force workers back into line. Amazon is another company that tries to use that pretense of liberalism to discipline workers from marginalized and oppressed backgrounds into shift jobs. And the warehouse where I work is super majority people of color, majority Black, and disproportionately queer. That's for a reason. People know that that's the only job that's really going to be available to them in the area, or the highest paying job. As a trans person, I know other trans workers who have advanced degrees. One of my closest friends has a master's degree in chemical engineering. She's never going to be able to get a job in that field. It simply won't happen in Ohio or Kentucky for out publicly as trans. Trans people are forced deep into the working class, forced into positions where our lives are constantly precarious, constantly unstable. For many workers, the year 2020 was a year where people stayed home and didn't leave their houses. For me, it was a year of not really knowing where home was, of sleeping on the couches of friends and comrades, of having the building I was living in sold off at the drop of a hat, and of scrambling to find somewhere to put a roof over my head. And yet, in all the propaganda of the capitalist class, we hear that being queer is somehow a symbol of wealth or decadence. That comes out of the Trump base constantly, about how you have all these rich trans people who are getting the benefits that should go to traditional masculine workers. This is a nonsense. It's exactly the opposite that's true. Trans people are deep within the working class. We're disproportionately homeless. We're disproportionately in shit physical jobs. We're disproportionately subject to street violence and sexual assault. And that's true even more if you happen not to be white.
Sorry, you're at your 2-minute warning that you requested.
And it's the very fact that queer workers and other marginalized workers are so brutally oppressed that makes them leaders in the fight for liberation. Oppression always and everywhere will produce resistance. And so in the struggle for working class liberation, it's almost always the most oppressed workers who come to the fore, take on leadership roles. The socialist movement has women's liberation, trans liberation, Black liberation, liberation for all woven into its very core. And the revolution we all seek, will only be fully realized under the leadership of the most oppressed and marginalized members of our class.
Thanks, Ryan. You actually, yeah, perfect timing. Thank you so much. Great. Our next speaker is Cindy Chartier with no preferred pronoun. And Cindy has been defending Pride events in rural Washington in solidarity with her queer and trans siblings. So I hand it over to Cindy.
Yes, hello, welcome everybody. And so I am kind of brand new to this actually. It all happened about a month ago when I just went to a poetry reading in Yakima, Washington. And many of the poets were LGBTQ plus people. And then I learned at that particular event that our city council, well, in Yakima, the closest kind of bigger city to where I am, decided that this year not to have the proclamation together with the Pride Month, to not speak about it being inclusion and equality. And when I found that out, I just thought, I can't not speak out about this. I can't not go to City Hall and speak. And so first I went to City Hall when I found out about it, and I listened to other people speak and what they had to say. And many of the people were in that community. Although I had a friend who also did speak up because he has family members, right, who are LGBTQ plus. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back and I am going to speak to the council. And they had a 5-2, where they were, that's why it didn't make it. Like they had a vote of 5-2. So otherwise there would have been the proclamation as there had been in the years past. This was a year that they decided, let's not bother to do that. And so I had 2 minutes to speak, or I thought I had 2 minutes. And when I got there, I found out I had 2.5. And so I wrote down what I said to them, to the council. I felt that they listened. And so I'll share with you what I said to them. Hello, pleased to be here. My name is Cindy Chartier. This is Pride Month. A time to acknowledge, and right here I did start almost like I was going to cry, but it didn't happen. I said a time to acknowledge the thousands of years of oppression, hiding away, silencing our LGBTQ plus community, as though they are not good enough or equal to heteros and those in their original birthday suit. I'm from a family of 11. 9 are straight, 1 is gay, 1 is transgender. I have 3 children, 1 is straight. I want to acknowledge and thank those of you who voted yes for the proclamation of inclusion and equality. Thank you to those in my community, state, country, and world who haven't climbed aboard the bigotry bandwagon circling our country today. The brave souls who recognize the easy targets our LGBTQ plus community have been, but who know they are not sex objects. They are taxpayers, doctors, lawyers, professors, students, artists, pilots, engineers, essential workers, daycare providers, volunteers at food banks, grandparents, sisters, brothers, children, pet owners, state representatives, etc., etc., etc. Our public servants in the United States of America have a number of responsibilities. As a nation, we currently have epidemic levels of domestic violence against women and children, sexual violence against women and children. School shootings is epidemic level. Number one cause of death for children 1 to 19 is gun violence. And homelessness is also at epidemic levels. So none of which are caused by the LGBTQ plus community. And we can do better. That was my 2 minutes. And then I realized I had a little bit more time. And in the meantime, before I had gone there, I'm a part of some social media groups. So my hometown, which is only 7,000 people here, and then Yakima also, which is the little bit bigger one. And so I was learning, because here in the local town that I live in, 7,000 people, there was a post about somebody from the school board was concerned because they wanted to put up a pride flag right as you walk into the high school. And so they wanted to get the community's feelings about that. And so it was good for me to be able to see, who was thinking what and how they were thinking and what was going on. But again, I did run into a lot of people who just simply do not see this community as full and complete human beings, full, complete, whole human beings. They see them as a label, and that is it. And I guess that's my issue, and that would be what I would want to share with people, is that, of course, it's easy to pick out a group, and then, and a very marginalized group at that, especially trans are said to be 0.5 to 1% of the entire population. And to be able to have, nothing irks my soul more than to be able to have somebody with a really huge platform, a politician, say, come against that marginalized group. Like, that is the most coward thing I could even possibly think of to be able to do. But the easiest thing to do, right? Most people don't know somebody that's trans, not personally, right? So it's easy to put that on them. But I believe, and who's going to go along with me? I don't know, but I believe there ought to be a law against it. I'm not really sure what we can do about bigotry, but I think there must be something that we can do instead of allowing it to keep fester and keep growing and just get ridiculously huge. Another thing that I noticed was brought up a lot in these social media was religion or God or Jesus. And so I did let the council know too that Jesus Christ actually didn't say a word about LGBTQ plus people, not a single word. And they've always been here, so he had every opportunity to say it, but he was exactly the opposite of that. He was exactly the opposite of that. The religious people in his day also had groups of people that they were against, right? Whores or whatever, throwing stones, beating them up, calling them names, blah, 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 blah. But Jesus hung out with those people because his message, as far as I could see, was heaven is within you. It's not after you die. It's right within you. Well, you can be a person, with a different sexual orientation or gender and still get that heaven within, because it's not dependent upon that. And I think that that's, really important to recognize. So even though I'm brand spanking new to speaking up and speaking out, I definitely feel that it's really important. It's just like for women and our reproductive rights, we need everybody to speak out for it, not just women. That's not going to work, right? We need to ask people to be able to speak out on that. I'm not sure how my time is doing, but I think I've
Yeah,
said.
you have two more minutes if you like.
Okay, I think I'm good though. I think I pretty much covered what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. And our third speaker is Raymond Ortega, pronouns he, him, who is a trans man who has been out and actively transitioning for 10 years, nearly 10 years. He has contributed to socialist and union organizing efforts, both in the Northwest and in Texas, and was on the officer board for 3 years for a student organization at Texas State University called Transcend at TXST, which sought to advocate for trans and non-binary students and their allies, supporting and is also supporting the Puget Sound Mobilization and Clinic Defense. So I'll hand it over to Raymond.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Like Emily said, I'm Ray or Raymond, he, him pronouns. And I was invited to speak by Gina from the Puget Sound Mobilization for Reproductive Justice. Just for a little bit of context as to who I am. I had my own math wrong when I did my intro. I've actually been out for a little bit over 10 years. I came out at 15 years old in Texas as not a girl, and then quickly realized that I am a trans guy. And I've been medically transitioning for a little over 7 years, including having gotten a hysterectomy. Before I even went to university, actually, I was involved with my high school's GSA around the Houston area for about 2 years, and I was president my last semester. And then I was on the officer board, like Emily said, for about 3 years at Transcend at Texas State, which, if you know Texas geography at all, it's a little bit south of Austin, in central Texas. And then around 2020, after graduating, or around graduation, I got involved with socialist organizing and tenant organizing in the Austin area and around there. I also got connected with union organizers because I started working for Starbucks, ironically, brought up earlier. And then I moved from Texas in 2022 and got connected up here. First, I sort of got involved with local trans support groups in the area, and I really liked being able to connect with the community up here. But I think a big difference between here and Texas is that politics and social issues are super intertwined in Texas, where like I think a lot of trans organizations have a sort of political line, but up here there's a little bit more of like trans organizations can be kind of apolitical in a way, kind of vaguely sort of progressive, which, has its place. But I sort of felt a lack of fulfillment up here just being involved with the trans only orgs because I just didn't feel like I felt just a lack of political fulfillment. And so that's when I sought out the Puget Sound Mobilization and got involved with clinic defense, and then continued with unionizing efforts with Starbucks up until very recently. Ray was talking about a lot of things going on at Starbucks, and I recently did leave Starbucks, but am very grateful for my union connections that I was able to make and for all the work that they do. And yeah, so going back to 2022 in Texas, my last year there, it was a pretty busy year politically. February of 2022, the governor, Greg Abbott, ordered for investigations of child abuse on parents who were supporting their children and providing them with gender affirming care. And then June 2022 was when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And then very quickly after that, in September of 2022, care for gender affirming care for trans minors was banned. And so there really is, I think, this direct through line in terms of reproductive justice and gender affirming care. That's pretty easy to see on its surface. But just to get also to go back into my own personal history, um, whenever I came out as a minor, I came out and I didn't have, this sort of medical control over my own autonomy. And when I came out in Texas, I was brought by my mom to Christian therapists and to Christian sort of providers who put me on hormonal birth control in an effort to essentially make me not trans. And so, but despite this, there's nothing that I hold against birth control. I am so in full support of full access to birth control and to abortion care because, like gender affirming care, it's about one's choice to be able to make that. You know, it's in the both regards of birth control and gender affirming care, it's about the individual's right to choose whether they want to go on birth control, whether they want an abortion or not, whether or not they want to transition medically or at all. And you can't have that choice without that access in the first place. And to take away that access is to take away one's autonomy in making that decision. I think the thing about Texas conservatives in general, but especially Texas conservatives, is they claim to want to curb government overreach in households, but this really only applies in the regard of adhering to traditional values, instilling conservative ideology, fitting in with religious norms, and normative gender roles, especially as well. Um, it's all about a parent's right to choose what they do with their children until it comes to them supporting their trans kid, things of that sort. And you see that especially with the push now, not only for taking away gender affirming care for minors, but also the push to take away funding for public schooling and pushing religious homeschooling. And then on sort of the flip side of that coin, um, the Democrats, in terms of both party and politicians, leverage social issues like gender affirming care and the sort of social acceptance of trans people as a whole to use it as a wedge issue to try to maintain the progressive vote. And this has led in the failure to codify things like Roe v. Wade and letting that opportunity completely pass them by, and then leading to that being able to be taken away. If they had truly been a party of the progressive people, they would have codified things like Roe v. Wade, and things like gender affirming care, especially. But they let that opportunity pass them by because they are, they are a party of the capitalist United States government. In a way, part of it is money, and then part of it is social control as well. And they fold to Republicans and let them take control of the conversation, even when their ideas are not popular. The majority of people want access to things like abortion. The majority of people in the United States don't care, if their neighbor is taking gender affirming care hormones or, taking birth control. That's not their primary concern. The average person wants good things for people in general, but there's this ability to fearmonger regarding people like trans people and fearmonger about abortion access. And that's used to leverage votes at the expense of the safety of people who seek abortions and people who seek gender affirming care. And then I guess my
You have
sort
2
of
more minutes.
okay, I was about to say this is about to be my bookend to my whole spiel on all of this. Is the sort of I guess there's both an irony and a sort of reflection in terms of both abortion and gender affirming care is conservatives hate the challenge that both abortion access and gender affirming care pose to the traditional cis heteronormative family structure. And they see it as, in the case of getting an abortion, they see it as taking away life. In the case of gender affirming care, they see it as taking away a person that could have been. But really, in both regards, it's about saving someone's life. Abortion access saves lives. Gender affirming care saves lives. And that is an undeniable fact. There is, solid research that goes into this stuff. But they don't see a trans life as being worth saving. They don't see someone who, is seeking abortion access as, that they don't prioritize that life. But yeah, I think that's basically my whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Well, again, I'm gonna do a round of applause for all three speakers. Really appreciate so much food for thought, all their comments. And so now we want to open up. I believe the chat will be opened, and we want to hear from everyone. If you have comments, not necessarily just questions. And what we'll do is we'll take a few participants rather than back and forth with the speakers, one to one. And if you would like to speak, if you could please use the raise hand function if you have access to that. And if you don't, you can also type stack in the chat, and the chat monitor will let me know that that you've indicated that in the chat. And again, now that the chat is open, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. If you could say who you are, where you're from, and just look forward to hearing from you now.